Thank you for joining me today. My name is Jay Anderson. I'm the owner of Dock & Door Tech, and I'm going to review the important items of proactive maintenance on a overhead sectional door. This is the most common type of door we see in the Midwest on loading docks, but we do work on many other types of doors, including high-speed, fire, rolling steel doors, impact doors, just to name a few. But once again, the overhead sectional door is the most common door you will see. It's very common in our market, and it's very similar to the residential door you'll have at your house. And the reason they call it sectional door is we've got different sections here on this particular door. There's 6 of them that pick up the components of the door. Before we get into the details of it, there are 4 parts of proactive maintenance. There's a lubrication, the inspection, the adjustment, and the documentation. For video purposes here today, I'm not going to cover the documentation, but I will be covering the other 3 parts. One other item before I get working, we got to keep safety in mind. I did barricade the outside of the door to prevent anyone from coming up and trying to use it or operate it while I'm working on it. And also the door operator, which we're not going to talk about today for maintenance purposes. We did disconnect that up there. You can see where we disconnected the arm. And also we have locked out the operator as well and tagged that out just to be extra cautious to make sure nothing happens while we're working on the door. So to get into the maintenance on the door, I'm going to start with my oil can, because one of the biggest things that doors lack out there we see when we go out on service calls is just lack of lubrication. And what I've got in my oil can is actually a 30-weight non-detergent oil, which is good for our application in our warehouse. However, you got to be sensitive to your environment. If you're in a food facility or different type of facility, you've got to be conscientious of what lubrication you use and make sure it fits with the environment you're in. So one of the first things that most people miss that we're going to catch is down in the back side here, the cables that control the door, which I'll cover in a minute. There's a tie-in point down there. I want to get some lubrication on that. Then I move over into this side. I've got a 10-ball roller in here I'm going to lubricate. And then the stem of the roller is important too, and a lot of people miss that. Doors not only go up and down, they actually do a little left to right, but we want to make sure we get lubrication on all the stems as well. And if you'll notice too, what we've done on our door as a preventive measure, proactive measure, is to put in a long stem roller in the corner. So we've got it at the bottom, and you'll notice here's a shorter stem, so it's 7-inch to 4-inch. And then if you look up at the top, we've also got a 7-inch roller up there as well. The reason we do that on doors for customers in our own door, if these ever get bumped, track, door gets out of the line, the first thing to happen is the roller will get popped out of the track. And if you've got a longer stem in there, it prevents that from happening because the door will have more sideways movement. It can kick over that much farther before the stem would pull out of the hinge. So, in addition to lubricating all this, I'm also going to inspect my mounting hardware. This door happens to be installed on wood box, and I can see everything's good and tight. If I wasn't sure, I'd grab my socket or my wrench and just make sure all that's good and tight. And probably the most critical ones on the door are going to be the red ones. Now, not all manufacturers do that, or installers may not follow the proper protocol, but anything that's red on the door is under tension, so you got to be really careful. You don't want to remove that without taking means to secure that energy. Moving over onto lubrication, this particular door has 3 styles, so there's 3 pivot points on every section. It's important to get lubrication down in here. On all of these, you want to make sure they're lubricated as they go around the radius, they turn. Eliminate noise, and it'll just prevent wear in the future. I would continue to lubricate. I would obviously lubricate all the rollers and hinges throughout the whole door. The other thing on inspection, as I go through and lubricate, I pretty much inspect at the same time. Just kind of speeds up the process. Another important thing is to look at the cables, and I'm kind of reaching back here, looking at this. I would make sure I have no fraying in this cable or the one on this side. Any fraying in the cable will cause problems, and as a proactive measure, the best thing to do is change out any frayed cable at all. What happens, they fray a little bit, they actually get a little longer, your door will sit crooked, can lead to energy loss, and obviously a frayed cable is just going to end up failing at some point. Definitely want to get that addressed right away. Once the door is fully lubricated, once I've checked all my hardware, I'm going to check the door for proper balance and adjustment. put this door here, this is perfect. It stays put right where we want it. The other thing that we can't see from camera angle, we make sure the door is adjusted properly in and out. As the doors come down, they tend to move into the opening, which is the way they're supposed to. That allows the door to seal properly against their outside seal. I stick my head out here, I check, I've got really good seal all the way around. So that's good. My bottom seal is good, my retainer that holds it is healthy. Everything looks real good on this particular door. For video purposes, I'm not going to climb up top on a lift today. It's much easier to just do it underground. But as you can see, we've simulated our spring shaft with what we have on top of the door. This particular door is a dual spring system. So if we move up to the top of the door, this is where there's just as many moving parts and pieces as there is down there in the ever-scary torsion spring on a garage door. We're always going to start, once again, with our lubrication, and we inspect as we go through. On the end of our shaft, there's actually some 1-inch bearings. This particular type is just something you can lubricate with oil. It's as easy. There also is another type on larger doors. It's called a pillow block bearing. For that one, we just use grease. In addition to oiling that, I would put a little oil on the drum, just a touch, just to keep the cable lubricated. The cable's actually a moving part. I would put a light coating of oil on my springs. Inside the springs, we'll get those out. There's some bearings here that would be in there we'd want to lubricate as well. Get both those lubricated up. I lubricate this spring as well. Same thing over here with my cable and back to my outside bearing again. One thing a little different on this shaft than we have up top, we put on here just to kind of show the difference. This has a split coupler on it, so this is something that would get into our adjustment and inspection as well. What this allows for, with a split coupler, you could put keyways in the drums, and you would have an infinite setting on the shafts as far as turning this left to right, an uneven surface, or you had a door on a square, you can plumb it up real easy with a split coupler. Our particular door doesn't have it, a little narrower, it just wasn't necessary. And then to finish up my inspection, be done with the lubrication, I would just check, make sure all set screws are tight. Same thing here, a lot of nuts and bolts and set screws that come loose, we want to make sure they're tight, and then same thing over on this side. The other thing we would need to adjust if our door didn't balance properly, once everything's all lubricated and other adjustments are made, the last thing we would do would want to adjust the tension on these springs. You've heard the horror stories of screwdrivers and people, hurting themselves. Unfortunately, they're all too real. You only want to use the right type of winding bar for the door spring. We do have a tool we often use if we're doing a tough to get at spring or a very large 6-inch duplex spring, which is a spring inside of a spring. We'll be sure to use that tool. It's just a little safer for our employees as well as yours. The other thing on adjusting tension on these springs, not only is there a tension adjustment, which everybody's pretty aware of, there's also a side-to-side adjustment, which is called stretching a spring. That's something we do as well to make sure it's properly set directionally. If it's not, what happens is the spring will start binding on itself. And often you can hear that indoors. It'll make some odd noises, and the spring is actually catching on itself as the door goes open and close. So that's a very important adjustment as well, is the stretching of the springs. This particular door setup has 2 springs. Some often have 1. One spring will tend to stretch a little more than 2. It's just the way it works out. So that concludes our portion of the door maintenance video today. And I hope you enjoyed it and found it very valuable. Thank you for your time.